All right, so let's dive into it. A fair warning, there's going to be a lot of data and a fair bit of chemistry in this talk. So if that gives you bad memories of high school chemistry, my apologies. Um, okay, role of water in health. We drink, as Mamta said, we have a lot of water, we drink a lot of water. And there are certain functions that water actually plays in our bodies. I've listed some of them here. And, these are sort of similar between the Ayurvedic system and science. You can draw parallels. Like, for example, tissue formation, there's something called dhatus and in Ayurveda where basically the water is what is a major component of the first dhatu, which is the rasa dhatu, which translates in modern science, if you will, as tissue synthesis. Nutrient transport, again, via rasa dhatu, via blood and lymph. That's the parallel in science. There's a pretty strong connection between water and Agni or digestion. And in science, you can think about it as water as a reagent. It's basically a chemical that enables or participates in multiple biochemistry reactions. Also, we all know that water supports all kinds of life, including microorganisms or our microbiome that lives in our bodies. So if we are not optimal in our water composition, that could sort of throw our microbiome composition off. Then, of course, it's very important in removal of waste. It's a fluid that is a carrier of waste and it regulates thermal balance. So these are some of the basic functions of water and why it's important. Some differences I want to highlight between how water was regarded in Ayurvedic system and how we kind of see it today. Like today, we are told our appetite for water should be insatiable, right? Like you should drink like liters and gallons of water, and even that's not enough. But Ayurveda had a kind of different view. So, first, water is one of the five great elements, like the Pancha Mahabhutas. And so it has certain properties. I call this unprocessed water. We'll get to what that means in a bit. But basically, if you just take like water as it's found in nature, it's got properties of being heavy, cold, and wet. Its properties can be altered by processing, for example, heating. It was known for being great as a nutrient and carrying nutrients in the body and also for drug transport. So there's a concept called anupana in water where, when you have some drugs which were herbal or whatever, water is a great carrier for this, meaning it takes the drug to the right place. There were some rules around like don't drink cold water because cold water, like because of those properties, heavy, cold, wet, it suppresses Agni, which has the opposite properties of being light and hot, etc. So drinking cold water was said to be bad for digestion. So warm water is more Agni friendly because it has slightly, compatible properties with Agni. And there was also this practice called Ushnodaka, which is excessively boiled water, where they boil it till the volume reduces to 1/4 of what you started with, and then you cool it and drink. And if you think about this practice, I believe it's kind of what we call mineral water today, because when you boil and evaporate water, and you were drinking like natural water which had like mineral content in it, and you evaporate like a lot of it, you basically get concentrated minerals. Minerals, they're good for digestion. They basically kickstart digestion in the morning. And so some of the recommendations in Ayurveda is drink water only when you're thirsty, between meals to optimize for Agni, and preferable to start your day with hot water to kickstart digestion. So one thing I want to say is when people talk about Ayurveda now, there's a lot of romanticism about going back to all these ancient practices and everything. But it's extremely crucial to look at these ancient traditions or knowledge systems in the context of the modern era, right? Because things have changed like crazy, right? For example, if you took like some water, your tap water, or some filter, any water that you didn't know what, I mean, we have like a lot of contaminants today. And if you were to do this Ushnodaka practice, you're basically going to concentrate your contaminants more than your minerals. Potentially, maybe it's possible. So you have to be like cognizant of a lot of things before we just blindly follow the ancient practices, just because the context has changed very, very dramatically. But that said, Ayurveda always says that it's not, what Ayurveda says is not like the law, it's not the truth, right? Ayurveda says, look, as new knowledge systems are discovered, they can be incorporated to add to this knowledge of what life is, right? And that's exactly, I think, it's very, very open, right? It's not like you got to stick to how it was laid out in the treatises back then. It's like as new knowledge comes in, please adapt. Okay, with that little opening, if you guys have any questions, please put them in the chat. I have a lot of material to cover, so we'll get to all the questions in the end. Okay, so this talk is going to be mainly focused on contaminants. So the first half is going to be about contaminants, and the second bit is going to be focused on these myths, lies, and whatnot, right? So we are now going to talk a lot about contaminants. So in Ayurvedic times, things were pretty simple, right? We had like microorganisms, like all unwanted, bacteria and whatnot. There were some natural organics, right? Like you have plants and debris that flow and contaminate the water. That's the natural organics. And those feed the microorganisms, which then bloom even more. And, we always had like heavy metals, right? Like if you have minerals, heavy metals, these are all natural things that leached into the water. So these were simple categories of contaminants back then, if you paint it with like a really broad brush. Now, what happens today? Now, of course, we have the three things that existed back then, but then we also have all of this stuff, which is industrialization has made life very convenient, but it's also made life very, very complicated. So what we've done today is by adding chlorine, we've kind of solved for microorganisms, but we've added a whole bunch of other contaminants from industrialization. We're going to go through some of these contaminants and kind of look at these very critically in terms of, are some of these more important than the other? Like, how do you even think about this problem? How do you know how clean is your water? Maybe we can have a show of hands. How many of you know how to find out if your tap water is clean? I don't see any show of hands.
Yeah.
So okay,
I
then
I just
this,
know one way of
uh-huh.
TDS and the pH paper.
Okay. Actually, there is a more very straightforward way, right? If you live in the US, I don't know about other countries, but if you live in the USA, you can actually go to your water utility and they are bound to share your water quality report. So I've put a link here. So if you just click this, you'll see like this beautiful report which has like, state of the art, like, measurements of a lot of things. And so that's what I did. So I live in Campbell. So this is kind of like the map. You can kind of see where you are, but a lot of us, like if you are Campbell, Cupertino, Saratoga, in this green area, and then there's another green area. This pink is San Jose, and you can't read this here, but the sources for the yellow, green, and red are slightly different. So you can go and see for each of the sources, like the red one is under groundwater, and the Yellow and green are more like surface water, mountain water, or valley water, whatever. Okay, so when I went and looked at this, I kind of looked at this is not the comprehensive list of contaminants that they have, but I kind of picked like some stuff, right? Like, hey, heavy metals, how much arsenic, right? So, how do you read this report? There are multiple limits that are set. Usually it's the EPA, but there's also like several, the FDA and several of these bodies. Then of course in Europe also they have certain entities that determine like for public health these are the limits that we should set. And I picked the lowest one, right, which is called the public health goal, which means the water need not actually meet these levels, these minimum levels, but this is kind of our goal, right? If we were to be like, in an ideal world, this would be kind of like our goal. Minimum contaminants should not exceed this level. So I kind of picked a very conservative, low control limit that they have. And these units are in parts per billion. So what does it mean? If you had like a billion particles or molecules of water, you would have like one part of the contaminant. So it's a very small number basically. A part per billion is very small. So if you look at this, so arsenic, obviously, because it's highly toxic, has a very low public hold, it's almost zero. And of course, these are also limited by the technology that can actually measure to parts per trillion level. So this is actually 4 parts per trillion. So very low number. Okay, so if you look at this, I highlighted the ones that I said, oh, maybe even this public health goal is sort of high. So, okay, there's only 500 parts per billion of nitrate plus nitrite. Actually, most of this, as you can see, is as nitrate in my water. So maybe if I can, I want to even filter that out and see if there's something available to filter out the nitrate. And then bromate, trihalomethanes, and haloacetic acid. So these are all what we call disinfection byproducts from adding chlorine to your water. So the chlorine, we'll get into that later. So these actually will be if you live in a city in the US, the biggest contaminants should be these disinfectant byproducts, which will have some sort of halogens attached to organic material. And then there's lead and so on. There's a little bit of lead in the water, 5 ppb. So I said, okay, if I can find what filter should I get to sort of attack this, because this gives a more strategic way rather than simply nuking and getting like, I don't know what, like the best filter on earth. I can kind of strategize and say, do I have a problem first? How big is that problem? And what do I need to do? ND means not detected. So the technology that they use to measure these things is not sensitive enough to detect anything. And then you see something called not sampled. So this is for PFAS. Not sampled means that they do not sample because they believe the source is not vulnerable to this contaminant. We are going to now talk about the most contentious contaminants, right? Which, for example, San Jose water does not spec microplastics, right? So they don't measure microplastics. There is some sort of a study going on microplastics, but they don't report microplastics. So we're going to go look at some of the most contentious contaminants, and I'm going to go really deep. It may be too much for you guys, but in the end, you'll get some practical guidelines. We'll start with fluoride. I remember there was some discussion in the Mahadev community on fluoride, and I was like, okay, why is this even a problem? First, why is fluoride added to water? And why is this such a big debate? Again, show of hands for anybody who knows. You guys are very silent. Uh, okay. All right. So we'll get into like a lot on fluoride. So fluoride is basically it's the and it exists. It's an anion of fluorine, which is a gas. So I mentioned there's natural fluoride as part of the Earth's crust and so on, which leaches into water. But then, the US started introducing this artificial fluoridation. And the main reason is because they found that fluoride basically had like a 50% decrease in cavities. So there was a lot of research done, and eventually they said the mechanism by which like the dental health improved drastically, especially in kids. There are a lot of pediatric studies on this. So kids apparently had like tons of cavities and was a maybe a public health problem. And so then they decided, oh, if you just like pump fluoride into water, although you only need it like, in your mouth, this is an easy way to sort of do good to our children by reducing their cavities, right? So this was there was a 50%, yeah, if you see this, there was a meta-analysis done on multiple studies, and the net is like a 50 to 60% reduction in cavities. Okay, so then, not every place has natural fluoride. And so they said, okay, we're going to start adding fluoride to municipal water. And what they actually do, how do they do this? They start with a compound called fluorosilicic acid. And this basically reacts with the water, generates the fluoride ions, and it also gives you silicon dioxide, which is also present naturally. It's basically a major component of sand. And so they said, okay, this is like a harmless way to introduce this without like a whole lot of crappy byproducts. And so, what is the debate on fluoridated water? So, again, you can go and look at all the thing. There's many reasons ranging from, oh, this is like the government trying to take your freedom away to whatnot. But I only care about the health aspect. So, the main thing that is concerning is that there are studies on animals and humans concerning fluoride intake, which seem to indicated neurotoxic, nephrotoxic. So neurotoxic means like there was specifically related to IQ. So like kids, the concern was, is there some retardation of their mental development? Some issue with nephrotoxic with kidneys and so on. So there's a pretty detailed meta-analysis on a lot of these studies. So we'll go into some detail just to understand like, okay, what is the real lowdown on fluoride? How big of a problem is this? This meta-analysis, I love this, right? Because it's very thorough. They reviewed like 74 studies. Most of them were from China, right? And there were like one or two, one from New Zealand, one from US. So most of this was done in China, where basically the net was they showed that there was correlation, or rather inverse correlation, between fluoride and IQ of children. And they also said the link was actually statistically relevant only at levels above 2 ppm. If you go back here into our little chart here, you see our control limit set, our public health goal is actually 4 ppm, which is 2 ppm natural plus 2 ppm treated. So it can go up to 4 ppm. But if you look at like my water, it's well below that. So it's only 800 ppb, which is zero point 0.8 ppm. So if I kind of look at this study, if I'm below 1.5 ppm, maybe it's not such a great deal. So that's kind of how I think about it. But you should always look at your source, because there are certain areas, maybe I don't know if it's in the US, but like in India, natural fluoride is actually in some parts is very high. So they actually have the inverse problem, how to remove the fluoride, right? So it just depends on where you are. Yeah, check your water report for how much of natural versus added fluoride there is. Okay, now here's the trick. To remove fluoride, you need very specific kind of filtration, right? We'll get into this more. So there are three main filtration technologies that we'll get into. Most common ones are activated carbon filters. These are like your Brita pitchers, just your countertop pitchers. Those have activated carbon. Most of these filtration things are activated carbon. They do not remove fluorine or fluoride. All right, so that was fluoride. So now we get to microplastics. So, is this a problem? This is very fascinating. I learned a lot from doing research on microplastics. I had no idea. Um, so, microplastics, what are they? There's a very precise definition. They're basically any small pieces of plastics which are less than 5 millimeters in size, right? So, that's kind of the definition. Now, this is something I did not know. So, fluoride, we saw what was the source of fluoride. So, what are the biggest sources of microplastics? I did not know this. Did you know that one of the biggest sources of microplastics are tires? Like when you drive on the road, the tires, by abrasion against the road, these little fibers come off. And when it rains, all that stuff gets washed into the water, our natural, whatever water body is. It gets washed into the ocean and into like rivers and so on. This is the second one are synthetic textiles. So there's a company called Horiba, which has this very nice pie chart, right? So if you look at like what are the sources, you see tires, synthetic textiles, and then city dust. This is just dust like, from all the crap that gets, including microplastics from the tires, right? That's also goes into the water, but it also goes into the air. Now, everything else, like bottles, plastic things, is just a very small piece of this pie. So, this is a very big problem because it's just, can you imagine like not driving, reducing the number of tires on the road? And yeah, textiles, like we really, if you want to avoid this, so when you wash these synthetic polyester type of stuff, these little fibers from the fabric, they detach and they get into the water system, the sewage system, and they just like, that's how they get released. And also when they shed, right, there's friction, it just releases these things into air. So these are the two main sources of microplastics.
Need
And they get
cars.
into the water.
We need flying cars, Cynthia.
Huh?
We need flying cars.
Different problem.
And so even flannel has plastics in it. I thought flannel was more all natural.
I think flannel, I don't know. Actually, I don't know. But I think some flannels are, what did they call it? Like microfiber something, right? So it's mostly these polyester kind of thing. I haven't really dug into what are the natural. Okay, I do know like rayon is okay. It is not made of plastic. I know that
Cotton,
viscose is not made of plastic,
oh,
but yeah, you got to look up which ones are.
cotton should be fine, right?
Cotton is fine. Yes, cotton is fine. Okay, so now this brought me to the question, okay, is my municipal tap water a significant source of microplastics? So I could not rely on SJ water because they don't test for microplastics. But I did find a paper which is really good, which had a lot of data on microplastics in a variety of things. I think the study was done in the US, may not hold for other countries. So this, I have the source listed here. So if you look at, this bubble chart, right? So they looked at a bunch of things, right, which are listed here: seafood, sugar, beer, bottled water, inhaled air, tap water, salt. So they just kind of sampled like, different bottled waters, different tap water samples and everything. And the numbers that you see here are the number of, what I did was I kind of like, they had data in terms of number of microplastics per something. So I just kind of looked at like how much, if you go out for dinner, how much seafood will you be eating? And somewhere I saw it was probably like 3 ounces. How much sugar? You're not supposed to have more than like teaspoons of sugar. We drink, okay, like a beer can is like what, 12 fluid ounces. We're supposed to drink 8 glasses of water. Of course, it's more because we cook with water, but anyway, I didn't want to get too nerdy on that. But like, let's say 2 liters of water. And roughly we inhale 12 cubic meters of air per day. And then our salt intake is supposed to be 2,300 milligrams. Biggest risk for salt with microplastics is sea salt, obviously, because microplastics get into the ocean, right? But if it's mined from land, don't think there is as much risk. But anyway, salt is a very negligible thing. So isn't it interesting? Like bottled water, look at the number. I guess because bottled water is not very well regulated. You don't know how long that water has been sitting in that bottle. And so I thought this was pretty revealing. And tap water is right about there. Am I going to stress about tap water and microplastics? Personally, mm, not so much. But I'm going to be really, really careful about the kind of clothing I buy. I'm going to be really careful about not drinking bottled water, right? Because that's what the data shows. And, I don't eat seafood. So, but if those of you who eat seafood, you want to, there's more and more contamination, unfortunately, in our oceans. So, this is kind of becoming a very nuanced problem, seafood. Okay, so what are the actual health risks of microplastics? There's a few, right? These are all like fairly modern contaminants, so we don't really know like the long term risks. But the studies to date, what they show is that you can have gut and tissue, inflammation, because they accumulate in certain organs. So it can lead to inflammation. Now, this chemical exposure is because usually now there's a second order issue with plastics is usually you have to add certain chemicals to make plastics soft, right? Most of you must have heard of BPA. So that is used to make plastics kind of soft-ish. These additives cause their own issues, which are linked to endocrine dysfunction. And then respiratory exposure, because these are all small particles, right? Less than 5 millimeters. So if you inhale them, it can lead to complications with respect to like respiratory issues, microbiome disruption, and yeah, so long-term systemic effects is not really unknown, but they do accumulate in certain organs, right? So, okay. All right. So that's microplastics. Now let's go to PFAS. So these are per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. So basically, you have like a big chain, you have a bunch of fluorine. So these are very, very inert because they're very stable and so they don't degrade, right? So the two most common PFAS which are found, there's actually many of these, but the most abundant are these two things called PFOA and PFOS. And SJ Water does spec for, not spec, but they do measure for these two, right? So that's why I'm focusing on these two. Okay, so PFO and PFOS are most common, and PFAS, I'm finding out, are literally everywhere. Okay, so do any of you, were you aware that there's dental floss which can have PFAS? After I read that they do, it was like, duh, that's kind of obvious because like, if you floss and you use one of those flossy things which nicely glide between your teeth and don't get stuck. For some time I actually bought like cotton floss, and it's like, if you guys have used cotton floss, it's like it gets stuck everywhere, and it's a pain. And so yeah, most of your dental floss, because they glide nicely, they have PFAS. Now that doesn't mean that PFAS gets into your body, but it's there. So they're everywhere. They're highly resistant to breakdown. because they're so inert. There's nothing there that can react at normal conditions and a normal period of time. So it takes years for them to break down. So they're called forever chemicals. And the thing is, the impact on human health is not well understood. So, how much PFAS is in your water? So, I mentioned that SJ Water reports the quantities. So, if you look at, so there's this PFH, so this thing, and PFOA and PFOS, these are all, notice, these are all in parts per trillion, right? So, these are very, very small quantities. And what is NL and RL? So NL is basically a notification level, meaning if the quantity of PFAS exceeds what it says under NL, the utility has to inform you. And if it reaches this RL, I don't remember what R is, but if it reaches these levels, then they have to shut down the utility. They cannot they cannot supply water, right? So for this purpose, we look at the NL. And if you look at, the three different sources here, so groundwater is generally more polluted than um, the mountain surface or valley surface water, right? So it was not detected in the yellow region, not sampled, they say, because it's not vulnerable to this contaminant. But if you want to be paranoid, um, okay, water is not where your paranoia should be directed, because PFAS exposure in humans is mainly via food. So again, I found this very nice paper. Um, Food is the it's even if you look at the San Jose utility SJ Water website, they have a little pie chart that says like 80% of your PFAS is coming from food, right? And for infants, like PFAS is everywhere, it's even in breast milk. And so for infants, that's the major source of exposure. And the bottom line is the major contributors were fish and shellfish. These PFAS are used in anything which are like in industries, right? Like if you have like stain resistant, like if you have a raincoat, right? If you can have like a fabricy raincoat and the water is just supposed to like bead off, that has PFAS. Paints and varnishes, like if any of you have remodeled a house, I'm sorry to say you've had like a heavy exposure to PFAS, because a lot of this material, construction material, carpets, microfiber couches, which are again stain resistant, waterproof, those kind of things are all, they have like the lighter PFAS, which are more susceptible to be inhaled and get into your system. Nail polish, whatnot. So what happens is, because of this, these factories make all these products, these chemicals get leached out, or there's also been very unethical dumping into water, and that starts the pollution. So the most vulnerable are water bodies because of this. Okay, so this paper looked at like a whole bunch of foods and how much PFAS. So the unit is picogram per gram, which is equal to part per trillion, just so you know. So they looked at like some veggies and bread and whatnot, right? And you see basically fish, cod, and especially the liver. So probably this is getting stored in the liver of these fish. It's like off the chart. It's kind of our water limit notification level, meaning like you should get a notification. Um, that's at 10 ppt, way down there. So water is not the thing I would be losing sleep over if for PFAS contamination. Of course, if you live in the US. Okay, now we get into I think this is the most important contaminant, which is disinfection byproducts. So what happens is chlorine reacts with natural organic matter like twigs and leaves, whatnot. And, of course, a lot of this gets filtered, but you can still have very, very micro level contamination that it's never like completely gone, right? So whatever there is, chlorine reacts with it to form these haloacetic acids and halomethane. So what happens here is that these have been highlighted with some risk, specifically related to bladder cancer, and less studied are some reproductive outcomes. Basically, there's this paper here which I've quoted where this was a meta-analysis of many studies, and basically they said the statistically significant risk of bladder cancer, this was focused on trihalomethanes, when this exceeded 41 micrograms per liter, and our EPA limit and even our SJ water limit is at 80 ppb. Microgram per liter is parts per billion. And so this is concerning, right? I personally would worry about this because my limit is at 80, and here are some studies which indicate that there might be some statistical significance to some adverse health effect, which is below our EPA limit. The filtration methods that luckily we can use simple activated carbon filters and reverse osmosis to remove this, so they can be filtered out. So some filtration is better than none. And so I've become more stringent about using, I just have a countertop filter. So I've become more stringent about, changing that filter, every 2 months just to make sure I'm getting enough protection. All right, which then leads to filters. So there are basically three different technologies for filtration. One is activated carbon, the second is reverse osmosis, and third is ion exchange. So there's this nice infographic on the EWG website from which I stole this. So you can look at this and you can see, but I want to point out like a few things. One is if you want to remove so depending on where you live, right? For most disinfection products, you should be able to, like the chlorine disinfection products, you should be able to find a basic countertop filter that can do a reasonable job. You can go look at specs. Even these little countertop filters will have specs. I'll show you an example. They are also good at removing some heavy metals and some PFAS. So they're not going to remove 90%, but if they remove 50%, I'll take it, right? So it's fine. However, if you live in Ohio or somewhere where there is more agriculture and the level of nitrates is much higher in your municipal water, then your activated carbon filters cannot filter out nitrates, period, right? That technology doesn't work for nitrates. So you got to go with a reverse osmosis system if you want to get rid of nitrates. The other thing that a activated carbon filter cannot remove is fluoride. So if you happen to live somewhere where there's too much fluoride above like your 2 ppm, which I would kind of like set a limit, although the natural plus artificial is 4 ppm, I would go with reverse osmosis. But if it's like so minimal, it's only 800 parts per billion, 0.8 ppm in like where we live here, I mean, it's fine. I would not sweat about fluoride. Then the third type is ion exchange. Ion exchange is basically used for softening water. And softening water means you're kind of removing calcium and magnesium, etc., which bind with soap and leave these ugly residues. So this is not really meant to be like a proper filtration system because it actually is working on the good stuff, right? Like calcium and magnesium are something like which help us, but it doesn't do such a great job of reducing most of the nasties. Now, the thing though One of the drawbacks of reverse osmosis is it wastes a lot of water. So I don't know, I've heard that there are new systems now where, like, if you want like 1 cup or 1 gallon of water, the ratio, right, how much drinkable water you get versus how much is wasted, water is wasted because it flushes the membrane out, is, I've heard, 1:1, which means for every 1 gallon of water that you get, 1 gallon is wasted. But most of the slightly older reverse osmosis systems, the ratio is more like 1:3, 1:4, meaning for every gallon of water you get, like 4 gallons of water is getting wasted. So this is something that I personally, this gave me pause. But yeah, you got to make your choices. And then for all these filters, you should have like some sort of a spec sheet. And most of these spec sheets, they should say there are some standards that they are supposed to meet, which is this NSF ANSI. And it'll tell you like, okay, here was the challenge for, they'll list whether the contaminant is there in your water or not. They list like 600 contaminants, right? Like many of them may be irrelevant, but you can look for like the basic stuff, and you can see how they do, yeah, in terms of percentage filtration. Okay, so yeah, this is again, there are, for PFAS, luckily you can have an activated carbon filter, which does decent job. So that's what I'm saying here, right? What they're saying is like, depending on how these activated carbon filters are stacked, you can have variable performance. That's the problem with activated carbon filters, is that it's not like very reverse osmosis. Most of them, like you buy a reverse osmosis filter, the only variable is how much water is getting filtered, wasted, right? But in terms of performance, they're fairly consistent. With activated carbon, you can have stuff all over the place. That's the problem. Okay. I've been talking very fast. Okay, so some of the thing, there was some discussion in the Mahadev group where somebody was asking, hey, reverse osmosis, I'm a little concerned. Yeah, it removes a lot of contaminants, but like it's also removing a lot of beneficial minerals. So is it that good? I don't know. Okay, so that led me to ask what minerals are actually present in water. So, again, there is a nice paper that sampled like a bunch of US municipal waters and basically found the following: calcium, blah, 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 blah. Okay, these are all like our essential minerals that help us. They quoted mean, median, min, and max levels. So this is milligrams per 100 grams, which is a slightly different unit, which is anyway, it doesn't matter. We'll get to it. But if you look at this, they also have a daily required something. This is kind of like, there's some guidelines, right? Nutrition guidelines that you should get 1,000 milligrams of calcium per day. You need, anyway, so that's this column, right? You need to get X milligrams per day of these essential minerals. So they converted all this into, like, if you were to drink 8 glasses of water, which is about 2 liters, how much of your dietary intake are you getting? So you're getting like 61 milligrams of calcium, for example, if you just take the average, the mean, right? So they took this number. Of course, you're going to get 10 times, no, 3 times more if you took a region where the maximum was 10 milligrams per 100 grams of calcium. So anyway, so now if you look at this, okay, right, water has some mineral content. It's mainly calcium. It's got, good amounts of copper, and maybe some little bit of magnesium. Everything else, sodium, you don't have to worry about. You're going to eat salt in your food anyway. But everything else it's so negligible, right? Like even if you used another 2 liters of water other than what you're drinking for cooking and whatnot, what does it look like? if you look at all these minerals, and this is the daily dose of water from the previous slide, but look at what you can do with food, right? So I just picked like some food sources, right? In general, uh, um, I'm vegetarian, so I didn't pick any meat. But and I'm not vegan, so I drink milk. But I can get a lot more of these minerals from one serving. So again, I kind of normalize this to one serving, right? Like if I have like 1 cup of milk or 1 ounce of 1 cup of grains, vegetables, 1 cup of nut seeds, blah blah blah. I'm getting way more significant amounts of minerals from food than water. But okay, I'm not going to poo poo at like the mineral content of water, but let's be realistic. We're probably getting between 5 to 15% of calcium and magnesium, depending on your source, right? You're getting a lot of copper, but you should actually be careful that you're not overloading yourself with copper. Especially if you're drinking from copper pots and stuff. So anyway, so this is sort of the lowdown on this is I won't worry too much, right? You have to look at, I would look at it from the lens of like, is my water source, do I need reverse osmosis, right? Like if I have a lot of nitrates, if I have a lot of fluoride, for example, I'm if I have like a very compromised, like some people go off the grid and they have to rely on some groundwater which might be severely polluted. So in that case, yeah, I would kind of pick a reverse osmosis system. And this is again personally my choice. Where I am right now, I feel fairly good about the source of water if I trust the reports that SJ Water is putting out, and I don't have a reason to believe they're lying. In fact, I think they have some of the best technology where they break it down into the different chemical composition and down to parts per trillion sensitivity is pretty good. So that is the thing on minerals. Okay, now that was my spiel on contaminants. So now I'm going to go to some interesting stuff, which is healthy waters, myths and lies. So some of this might be triggering to some of you. I don't know. I'm going to take that risk. But again, this is just like I try to present this in a not give my opinion, but I just try to like dissect, what is being said and kind of like, what do you actually mean, right? So because there's a lot of these healthy stuff that's being purported. So there's mineral water, spring water, alkaline water, hydrogen water, electrolyte water, glacial water, vitamin infused water. Maybe I'm missing a few other waters. I don't know.
Structured water.
But hmm?
Structured water.
That's a separate topic. The first thing I would say is if any of these waters are coming in a plastic bottle, you remember that bubble chart I showed you? It's probably going to be contaminated with microplastics, right? So that's a red flag. Any of these waters coming in plastic bottle, I don't care what you say. I'm not going to touch it. So mineral water, right? This is okay. At least this water, they have like some sort of spec, meaning mineral water has to have at least 250 ppm of total dissolved solids. So TDS is total dissolved solids. So you see the problem with this now? What do you mean by total dissolved solids? It can be like all the good minerals. It can also be nonsense, right? So contaminants. So that's why I never talked about TDS because it's kind of like, as far as I'm concerned, it's like if someone I think TDS is like a uh, uh, very irrelevant metric. And I think the only reason that all these water testers and all talk about TDS is because it's the cheapest way to measure anything, right? Like I can buy a TDS sensor off of Amazon today for like a couple $100 and test my water.
There's
Uh,
also $9 to send it.
what? $9? Oh, there you go. So this is like totally not like useful, right? Because it can have like all your other stuff is also dissolved solids. It's not precipitated solids, right? Like your nitrates and whatnot. Now we come to structured water. So actually, structured water is also known by many other names. I don't know if you guys know hexagonal water. There was some biologist who coined the term easy water as a take on exclusion zone water. It's called coherent water by some, energized water, fourth phase of water. So, some very creative naming has gone into structured water. So, what exactly is structured water? So, I asked this question because I never heard about structured water until there was some conversation on the Mahadev group. And I asked, what is this? And somebody forwarded me this video. So I'm going to play this video and then we're going to critically analyze what is being said.
Distributed positive and negative charges in the molecule. Though water as a whole neutral, but there is internal polarization, it is called. So the polarity of the water molecule brings into this wonderful structure of the water. So now if the water is not structured, how do we make destructured? If we keep adding lot of minerals, lot of polarized chemicals, the structured nature gets disturbed. But then in nature, the runningness, I mean, the water is running always from higher altitude to lower altitude. That is the nature of things. So that kinetic energy keeps this structured water as structured as long as the water is running. So once the water stops running and stagnates, again, all these other parameters come into play. So if you have a stagnated water.
Okay. I actually watched this video like 2 times and I was trying to understand what is meant by structured water. So what he says is structured water, like if you have like a lot of minerals and blah blah blah, then you break the hydrogen bonding, you weaken the hydrogen bonding of water, which inherently gives it that fluid property, right? Which is actually true. So this is actually a snippet. So I got very nostalgic and I dug up a paper that I wrote back in my postdoctoral days. So you can look at spectroscopy and you can look at where these water molecules are stretching. So bottom line is that you see this is like water, distilled water, right? And this is like the hydrogen. There are two peaks for the hydrogen bonding. And if I add a bunch of salts here, I have sodium iodide, sodium bromide, sodium chloride, and then neat water is in green. You see how this peak on the higher energy peak is actually becoming more intense. So this is a spectroscopic signature that the hydrogen bonding is getting weaker just based on what sort of stretches are happening here. So what he said is true, but there's a lot of confusion here where this thing about water flowing kinetic energy, yeah, you got to ask what is being discussed here. So I don't think that has anything to do with anything because actually kinetic energy, so hydrogen bonding is very dynamic. These bonds break and form, and they have a lifetime on the order of picoseconds. So they're extremely short-lived at room temperature. So it's not like because they're flowing from a mountain to like the valley, these hydrogen bonds are getting, there's more hydrogen bonds or something. In fact, it should be the opposite, where, if you agitate water, the hydrogen bonds actually break more often. And you get like, yeah, I just made this thing on Chat GPT, so it's not realistic. But the idea is like, you agitate water, it should actually, by the argument used that structured water means more hydrogen bonding, it's actually the opposite. Okay, then it kind of gets
Drink water, you want to drink structured water. So how do I achieve that in my house? This has been achieved long ago by our ancestors. They have figured out a copper plate, put it into this kind of stagnated water, can make the water structured again, for the simple reason that the surface of the copper plate has got free moving electrons, negative charge. So when a free moving electron is immersed in the water, the delta negative and delta positive get structured again. And that is the beauty of copper plate. Is there no other metal that can do this job? There is no other metal actually. Though silver has got very similar structure, there is a d orbital electrons, but the bandwidth, the energy, wavelength of that energy bandwidth is matching with copper, not with silver. So silver also can kill virus, bacteria, because this running electron tears apart the skin of the virus or the bacteria. That's why this is the best.
There is a fundamental confusion between hydrogen bonding, which is associated with structure, and disinfecting. So what is true is copper, right? He talks about the copper plate. Back then, people used to store water in copper. And it is true, actually, even a lot of the doorknobs and stuff in hospitals are made out of copper because, like, copper leaches into water and it binds to the cell walls of microorganisms. Thereby, it kills them. So, copper is a fantastic disinfecting metal. So it's also used as organic, when we have organic produce, the fertilizer that is used is copper, some copper sulfate or something, because it's very good to prevent against fungus and all those microorganism stuff. So I think it's more logical to assume that, this copper business was used back then when microorganisms were a big problem and people were dying of cholera and all these waterborne diseases. But today, it's like you already have like chlorine, which is doing that job. So this whole structured water is not very, it's kind of a fuzzy topic, right? Like, the closest scientific explanation that was given by somebody was this fourth phase of water. But basically, what they said is like, if you have some electric field, then the water molecules, like close to the electric field, will organize like ice, right? Basically, that was it formed the tetrahedral structure like ice. And then they said, oh, this is fourth phase of water, and started marketing some product for. So you can have electric fields. I've also seen contraptions where they have like some tunnel. They will agitate the water like, like a tornado, and they call that structured water. Then there's this copper plate. I think copper plate is for disinfecting. I think this is my last slide. Whew, made it an hour and a half. Okay. So what are my key takeaways on all of this stuff on water? So I think the USA municipal water is pretty well regulated. We have test reports available for you to plan a filtration strategy. Regulations and testing for bottled water less stringent than tap water. It seems bottled water has a higher probability of microplastics contamination based on the data that I showed you. Generally, the most important contaminants to worry about in city tap water in the US are disinfection byproducts. I think any major city, not just the US, are disinfection byproducts. RO, reverse osmosis, is the best filtration technology, but it involves a lot of water wastage. It also removes beneficial minerals, but you can get these in far larger amounts if you eat a balanced diet. Activated charcoal filters or pitcher filters are better than no filter, but you must ensure that you change them per specification. Those were my key takeaways. So I hope that was useful.
Does TDS measure microplastics?
I don't know, actually. I don't know. I didn't actually bother to do any research on my TDS.
And is there anything that measures microplastics in a domestic setting?
No, none of these things, no. As far as I could tell, The only thing that you can measure at home by yourself for a reasonable amount of money is the TDS thing. Otherwise, it costs thousands of dollars. So I used to work for this company that basically uses very state of the art um, technology to measure things down to the parts per trillion range. Those are not cheap. So you have to send it to some analytical thing. It'll cost you a dear penny. Yeah. So there's also, like most of these things, municipal water is very well and highly regulated. There's FDA, there's EPA, blah, blah, blah. But these bottled waters are only regulated by FDA, right? And FDA is like more lenient than EPA as far as these things are concerned. So that's the problem with these kind of waters.
So microplastics are a relatively new thing. The utilities, are they upgraded to measure microplastics?
No, that's what I said. No, they do not quote. Many of them are working to measure microplastics, but they don't report them yet. Okay, so
Is the
then,
source of the microplastics mostly the transmission mechanism, i.e., the pipes, or the spillover? At this,
so I don't know if you saw this chart, but I went through this. Okay, see, it's tires and synthetic clothing. And if you live near a factory, it's city dust.
no, but like for example, with the bottled water, it's the plastic. So if
Yeah.
the transmission mechanism, even the source of the water is good, if the transmission mechanism is plastic pipes.
No, well, it can be plastic pipes, but for bottled water, it's likely not the plastic pipes. It's the plastic leaching from the bottle.
No, I mean for municipal water. I mean,
Oh, for municipal water, well, the source is mainly, I don't think we have that many plastic pipes. Plastic pipes is a contributor, but the bigger problem is that the source itself is getting contaminated because of runoff, right? You have these microplastics on the road, and it's the source getting contaminated, and the whatever filtration they can do is probably, I don't know. This is all relatively new, right? So it's a source. The plastic pipes are a risk factor too.
But it's mostly inside the house, right? We have the plastic piping.
Yes.
If we don't have copper, then we have plastic.
Yeah, that's right. I don't know. Is plastic pipes very common here?
Yeah, that's why at least the last previous house that we bought, it had plastic, and we replaced it with copper.
Okay.
and one thing I was told with plastic is there are apparently two major factors that damage plastic. One is the age, and the other is heat. Now, with bottled water, if we are not, obviously exposing it to sunlight, and there's not much age associated with the bottled water, where does the leaching come from?
No, so you don't know, right? You don't know what the age is. How do you know?
And if the bottled water says BPA free, will it still have?
No, yeah, this BPA and all is all like marketing. So what the thing is, BPA is very studied. This is like parabens in skincare. They'll pick something and oh, this some health concern. But look, they are still using some plastic softeners, right? Instead of BPA, they're using something else, and we have no clue what that does. So it's just like kind of taking the BPA off the hot seat, but we don't know what else is there in your plastic.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, another very concerning source of microplastics is and potentially PFAS. Maybe PFAS more than microplastics. I don't know, but it's the food container packaging, right? Like
Ziploc.
Not Ziploc. Like if you go to a restaurant and you take a takeout dabba or a
Oh,
coffee
okay, those things, yeah.
coffee cups, right? I don't know what the heck they're lined with, right? So I'm sure like for this grease protection, they use it's supposed to be banned in California, like to line food packaging with PFAS. But I don't know if they use, I have no idea. So I'm very, very uncomfortable putting piping hot food into those things.
Yeah,
'Cause
heat and age are definitely no. With bottled
yeah,
water, do we with any plastic, do we know the exact, is there like a threshold? Okay, after 6 months the leaching starts, after 1 year it starts.
I don't know. I have not looked into that.
My guess is that it also depends on the quality of the plastic used, right?
Yes, that is
Yeah.
true.
There is a race to the bottom, the thinnest plastic.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I do not know.
Exposed to heat, I feel the water bottles when they're being transported.
Yeah, but I just thought that paper that looked at the sampling was very revealing. So it is leaching. So, these things sit on shelves for who knows how long.
I don't
Um,
have an expiry date.
yeah. Uh,
Yeah, another thing
okay.
with water is, the good old quote unquote taste of the water. So,
That's only for chlorine, right? The taste is just like if you have chlorine, what you're tasting is chlorine.
I know, but if at least in India, when they drill a new well, one of the
Ah.
kind of like the yardstick is, oh, it's a very good tasting water, they say. Now,
So
yeah.
that is a reflection of the mineral content. Yeah.
So what contributes to the taste? Like
Mineral content.
I know which what mineral mix is ideal.
It's mainly calcium and magnesium, like you saw in this chart, right? I think those are the two main minerals. The others are too negligible to, I think, make
Oh, makes
uh, yeah, a significant impact on our taste buds.
Yeah, one thing I found with water is, there is, the spring water, this, if you get it right, the taste is really good.
No, but like there is this guy who does like pretty nice. He's a professor and he does this pretty entertaining videos on chemistry, okay? So he literally he takes video footage of people, and I try to copy this guy sort of that you'll see in my next slide. He takes video footage of people saying things about, like for example, in this case, spring water, and then he like dissect every sentence, and he's like, you probably don't realize when you took a sip of that sparkling creek water, like how many animals like peed in it or shat in it?
No, but even, the spring water does go through filtration, the ozone filter or something. There's some filtration it does go through. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, the bottled spring water. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
he was talking about, but
Oh,
again, there are not very tight regulations around this,
so you have
right?
to go with word of mouth and reputation and, staying power. So
Yeah. So I think the problem that I have fundamentally with this is that, like municipal water, like you saw, it's so clear, cut and dry. You get the data, but with this you don't get the data, so you don't know what's in there.
municipal water does have chlorine. The whole bacteria disinfects. That's their thing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
But do the
yeah.
RO remove chlorine? Does the RO? I think it does remove chlorine.
Yes, yes, it
The
does.
chlorine to the rest of the house, like to your showers,
Mm-hmm.
is very damaging to skin and hair.
Yeah, for that, Mamata, I bought a shower filter. It's
Yeah.
pretty cheap. Yeah, you could do that.
And they also have activated charcoal filters for the whole house.
Mm-hmm.
I inquired about it and it's like $5,000. That's too much.
Yeah, they are not cheap. Yes.
Yeah. Karthik, please do share if you like your um, showers filter, please.
Yeah, it's a bolt on. You just basically, it sits right between the shower, the thing, and your so the shower pipe that goes into the wall and your shower accessory. It sits right between them, and it is charcoal based. And I think you're supposed to change it every 6 months or so. I'll share it. Yeah. So I did not get a water. So a lot of people do this water softener thing. That's
Yeah.
That doesn't remove much, seems like, but
No,
people
that's mainly to remove calcium carbonate and magnesium salts.
But people, especially people who came from India, they really rave about the skin and the hair benefits it supposedly gives.
Um, Again, so if you are like, so the mountain and valley water has about half the calcium and magnesium as groundwater. So if you live in San Jose, you're going to have like way more hardness in the water. So again, it depends on how hard your water is. Yeah, but like I can imagine like in India, where I was growing up, it was pretty hard water, and you get like soap scum and all left on your hair, and that's not pleasant.
Supposedly, the best water in the Bay Area goes to San Francisco, piped straight from Yosemite.
Yeah, I don't know. I only looked at SJ water because that's where I live. Yeah,
Yeah,
but you can.
we don't get the good water. The good water goes. I think Peninsula also gets few parts of the peninsula, Palo Alto, and maybe few parts of Sunnyvale. I heard that's the 100 year old project.
Yeah, but the good thing is we don't have to do any guesswork. You can just go and look at the reports, and I think we're pretty good. Yeah, we have. I'm sure they also have chlorination, disinfection products, contaminants, but
Well, they do, but Yosemite is kind of far from the agrarian belt, I guess, because it's kind of there out there, I guess.
yeah, okay. So they may not have as much nitrates, but our nitrate level is also pretty low. Anyway, we can, yeah. So you can look at the data and
That saying
And does cooking remove PFAS?
no, PFAS are very, very inert. So they just stick around. They're not heating or all that doesn't really do much.
So they're not a petroleum byproducts.
They are, I don't know. I mean, it could be, but the point is that they are, so every hydrogen, so they're organic compounds where all the hydrogens have been fluorinated. So it could be that it starts with petrol. I think it probably starts with the petroleum industry.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move on in the interest of time, and then we'll take more questions at the end.
So do this PFAS microplastics, do they stay in gut or do they get absorbed into the bloodstream? The reason I ask is if they do stay in the gut, one could hypothesize that taking a activated charcoal tablet once in a while could kind of absorb them.
So there seems to be they do accumulate, but they also get discharged because they find microplastics and PFAS in breast milk. But there's also some evidence that it gets accumulated in some organs.
No, in organs.
Yes,
Organs are hard.
organs.
how does it get into breast milk?
I mean, it's it's in your body, right? So
Even
I mean, you can detect it in urine, so you can detect it in breast milk. So it's just like,
it's present.
So
yeah,
it's definitely crossing through the gut layer.
yes.
There's there's nanoplastics which are seen in sperm also. So it's
Hmm.
infiltrated everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty much everywhere. PFAS and microplastics are everywhere.
And they still haven't found out if they're just inert and just sitting there or if they're having some second order effects like being carcinogenic or things like that.
So I showed you that for PFAS, there are a few studies that, no, sorry, not for PFAS. For PFAS, what did I say? Did I hit
You
on
said
any?
the health impact is not
No,
known.
so PFAS, I think it's too early. It's not really known what the chronic uh, health issues could be. But for microplastics, there is, some studies that mainly have to do with inflammation, microbiome, etc. So again, these are fairly new, so long-term systemic issues are not well understood or studied. There's just not been enough time.
Right. And with the chlorine reactivity, then the whole chlorinated swimming pools are pretty bad then.
Yeah. So, yeah, especially if you inadvertently drink it, right? Of course, something will get through your skin, but yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I can't get into the swimming pool on a regular basis. I will get rashes all over my face. And one of my Palo Alto customer also said the same thing. And then she was extremely happy that applying sesame oil before entering the swimming pool kind of stopped the rashes for her.
Yeah, act as a barrier, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Here and then, but there are many pre-swim lotions that you can buy and apply, but they didn't do their job.
Yeah, I mean, there used to be this thing called saltwater pools. I don't find them here anymore. At least, in other states. Even in India, people are starting to use these saltwater swimming pools or something like that. Non-chlorine swimming pools.
Okay. Yeah.
Sandhya, can you elaborate on disinfection byproducts? Is that chlorine that you mentioned?
No, it's not chlorine. It's basically chlorine when it reacts with organic matter, it forms organic compounds, so organic compounds have carbon and hydrogen, right? So imagine you have some organic compounds where some of the hydrogens are replaced by a halogen, which is chlorine. That's what it is.
So does this relate anything to do with the products that we use, Clorox, bleach, or any others?
Well, they are separate. So bleach is a different problem. That bleach is not organic, it's hypochloric acid. But it is very toxic because if you inhale, so that smell that you will get, right? Anything that relates to bleach will release some chlorine gas. And in general, inhaling chlorine or bromine or any of these things are not good for you because they are very reactive. So they cause a lot of oxidative stress in your body, meaning that they will go and react with a lot of things in your body if you're exposed. So I would not I don't personally use bleach. I don't personally use all these wipes and stuff because uh, you don't need them. You can you can use like plain old baking soda for most cleaning, actually. It's surprising how effective it is.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and using baking soda to disinfect any fruit, strawberries, or that also is pretty good. Just put a pinch of baking soda and just soak your strawberries